My name's Joe. You can get me on Twitter at ocripes, and I'm talking today about threes, 2048, and sort of clones in general.
More microphone.
More microphone, okay. Are we playing yet?
Yeah, I think you are.
Oh, okay, I had too long on this slide. I don't have enough to say about myself. Okay, so threes is a game for the iPhone. You probably heard of it. You sort of move tiles around. You can sort of merge them together, a bit like Triple Town is another sort of similar game. You play until the screen fills up with tiles, and then you die, and you have to try and get a high score. So it's a bit like Tetris as well. It's sort of like a sliding puzzle game. And it was in the sort of awareness recently because it's been cloned by another game called 2048. Sorry, 1024. I'm getting my numbers all mixed up. There's a lot of numbers in this talk. So 1024 was another mobile game which changed some of the rules. There's some different rules about sliding blocks, some new tiles introduced, but the art style and the general feel of the game is very similar. I mean, this was followed by a third game called 2048, which was a clone of 1024, and the guy who made it, Gabriel Cirilli, hadn't even heard of threes when he made it, but it turns out he cloned threes, without realizing. And 2048 is apparently the reason we can't have nice things. This is what I read on the internet. The interesting thing about 2048 was it was open sourced, the other games weren't, and it was freely playable on the web. So GitHub is the site it was on, and when I took the screenshot the other day, it had 2,500 forks on GitHub, which is 2,500 clones. So not only was this game a clone, but it had 2,500 clones itself. Some of the notable clones I want to run through quickly. So Doge 204, which is basically the same game but with dogs and Comic Sans, and then Flappy 204, which is like a double clone because it's like Flappy Bird but also numbers. And I got up to 10. That was my high score. I didn't play it for very long because it was a bit shit. Number one. This is so Asher Volmer, the guy who made threes. This was his favourite 204 clone. He said Number Wang 204, and it's basically a parody on the game. It doesn't really make sense. None of the numbers add up, and it's based on a sort of a comedy sketch. So going through some of the other sort of 204 clones. 208 3D, and this is sort of like you can imagine it on a 3D cube, like they play chess in Star Trek. You can move your tiles upwards and downwards and left and right and backwards and forwards. And I didn't get very far in it either because none of these games make that much sense to me. But moving on from there, we have this 208 cross game where you've got sort of two boards joined together and you can merge tiles in the middle and stuff. And this hexagonal game, which is sort of the same, but you can move all your tiles in 6 directions, and you can do the whole merging thing and get a really high number in 6 dimensions. And then this is an interesting one. This is basically Twitch plays Pokemon, except it's 208 online multiplayer. So 1,000 people can play it at once, and And then this one is this is really interesting actually because it's a level-based puzzle game based on the same concept where you merge tiles, but you have to clear the screen, and there's obstacles and things. Well, anyway, so Asher Volmer was pretty upset by all of this, and he wrote a very, very long post about all the effort he put into threes and how, all the effort he put in basically. And he talks about clones and rip-offs and stuff. One of the games he mentions a few other sort of famous clones, notable clones, and one of them is Commander Keen, right? Which is basically a clone of Mario. At the time when Mario came out, it was the sort of progenitor of the modern 2D platformer. And Commander Keen sort of got on that horse and sort of said, we're going to try and do the same thing, but for the people who can't, don't have a SNES or whatever, a NES. And I had Commander Keen when I was a kid, and I loved it. And it's funny that he brings up Commander Keen as a sort of, a clone game, because obviously id Software went on to create Doom. And this is the point I scheduled for a sip of my drink. Yeah, so this is a photograph I took of a copy of GamesMaster I have at home from like 1997 or something, and it's called The Doom Boom. This is a piece of the article, and it says, of course, if you want real senseless violence, then you really need to go to Doom or one of the many clones that are around. And I remember this for years. Doom FPSs weren't called FPSs; they were called Doom clones. And this is like how genres happen, basically. I don't think Volmer's real complaint is about Keen. Like, I don't think he thinks it's a terrible game, but he says that because it appeared a year or two later after Mario, that was fine. Mario had its chance in the spotlight, and everyone remembers Mario. But with threes, the guy who cloned threes and don't even remember it. But what we can do about it, okay. So the music industry, they sue everyone who copies their ideas. And this is John Denver, who wrote Leaving on a Jet Plane, right? And he sued New Order because they wrote a bridge in one of their songs which he thought sounded like his song, Leaving on a Jet Plane, but he died in a jet plane crash. So what can we learn from that? Cannibal is a modern example of a genre progenitor. It's got a lot of sort of very similar games as they came out, these endless runners, including really lucrative ones like Temple Run. It was made in a few weeks for the experimental gameplay project, and it's been open source since, and clones have been made of it, of course. Saltzman recently cloned Flappy Bird as well, so that's sort of interesting. So what can we do? Blame. Where does the blame go? Can we blame Tesco's for selling us horse meat burgers? Can we blame us because we don't know what's in our burgers? Or should we blame the Romanians for making horse meat burgers? In this analogy, horse meat burgers are clones. This is where the talk falls apart, but basically people are getting drunk in the park and they're drinking White Lightning and Stella Artois, but they shouldn't be drinking that shit because it's easy to make, easy to mass produce, and the original people who invented beer, the people who really care about it, don't get any credit. We should be drinking craft beer. We should be paying twice as much, caring about fonts and sort of the way our hair is. There's supposed to be a conclusion here, but this is the last slide. So thank you very much.